Hi everyone, this is your producer Peter Finger. Before we jump into today's show, I want to share an exciting opportunity with you. The Triad Summit Series happening online on February 20th. This free event brings together top experts in the field, and attendees will also have a chance to earn CE credits. This year's lineup features an outstanding group of experts including Amy Pickett Williams from the Light Movement, Lindsay Bonham from Money Nuts and Bolts, Bronwyn Schweikart from Angry at the Right Things podcast, and returning speakers Dr. Laura Ignacio and our very own Dr. Graham Taylor. They'll be covering essential topics for mental health professionals such as healing from grief, financial skills for therapists, managing and understanding anger, and self-meaning-based therapy for couples. Don't miss this opportunity to learn, grow, and connect with leading experts in the field. Register for free at triadhq.com/TSS. That's triadhq.com/TSS. We look forward to seeing you there. Welcome to Behavioral Health Today, a podcast brought to you by the Triad Network. This podcast is designed to share trending topics occurring within the world and our communities and bring them a behavioral and mental health perspective.
Welcome to Behavioral Health Today, a Triad production. I'm your host, Sharlee Dixon. Joining our show today is Wendy Cole. Wendy is a transition mentor who guides individuals through major life changes with a focus on self-acceptance and personal growth. After navigating her own gender transition at the age of 67, Wendy draws from her personal experience and empathy to help others overcome fears and doubts, whether they are transgender individuals, parents of transgender children, or women entrepreneurs facing imposter syndrome. Her journey of self-discovery and resilience allows her to offer proven strategies for thriving through significant transitions. Wendy is passionate about helping her clients embrace their true selves and live fulfilling lives. We're excited to have Wendy with us today to discuss her personal journey of transition, the mental work needed before transitioning, and her coaching approach to overcoming fears and doubts. Welcome to the show, Wendy.
Hi, Sharlee. I'm super happy to be here. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. So let's just jump right in, Wendy. Can you start by sharing what inspired you to begin your transition journey and how that process has evolved for you?
Well, my transition journey actually started when I was born because I was born transgender. And gender is between the ears, not the legs. But when you're born, the only thing they have to go by is your physical anatomy. So it was announced I was assigned male at birth. That's when the socialization process starts.
Absolutely.
As I grew older and got up closer to 4 years old, somewhere in that ballpark, 3, 4, I started to know I was different. By 5 and 6, I knew I was one of the girls. This was a huge mistake. During the second trimester of birth now, which I know is when my gender identity was formed in my brain along with my sexual orientation, I had no idea how to deal with this as a child. I just knew that from the socialization, it was very bad for me to say to my parents that I'm a girl. Well, school started, and of course, I go off with the boys, but I know I should be over with the girls. And finally, by age 10, I couldn't take it anymore. I told my parents. There's quite a bit around that. And ultimately ended with me being taken to a psychiatric facility where I heard from the psychiatrist that, oh, yeah, he's too young to diagnose as a transsexual. That's what they called us in the late 1950s.
Okay.
And this may be just a little transvestism, boys experiment. And as he gets older, when he has a career, he has a wife, he has a family, and a house and everything, he'll forget all about being a girl. For the first time in front of my father, I actually spoke up and said, "No, I'm a girl." I was taken from the room. At the end of all of this, I had 5 sessions with the psychiatrist. Most of the time, I sat in the waiting room. I wasn't part of the discussion. This is the 1950s where children are seen, not heard.
Not heard. Mhm.
So I was threatened by my parents with being committed to the psychiatric center and stay there, and they would fix me unless I stopped saying that I was a girl. That began a life of repression. It reemerged as I was graduating college in the early 70s. At this point in time in New York State, I would be arrested for appearing in public as a female when assigned male at birth. Arrested, thrown in jail, fined, name published in the paper. That was happening all over New York State, even New York City, where I grew up. So that was even in San Francisco too. So I did have a psychiatrist who was helping me at that point try to transition. I was coming out to neighbors, I was coming out to friends locally, not the ones on campus. This was a big secret still.
Yeah.
That's how I lived my entire life. It was a big secret. So the psychiatrist had me as a case study patient in front of a group of psychiatrists from the area. This was in upstate New York, Schenectady, Albany, Troy. And I'm in a hospital conference room with about 15 or 20 psychiatrists. We're all sitting there, and I start talking. I don't get even 5 minutes into what I'm saying, Sharlee, and one of the men stands up, looks around the room, says, "Okay, I've seen all I need to see or hear this quarter. I'll see you all next quarter." Turns to me and says, "You're a freak. You should move to New York City and turn tricks like the rest of them." I was floored, devastated. By the way, that ended the meeting. There was only one person in there that defended me besides my own psychiatrist, and that was a female psychiatrist. Everybody else just let it go and left the meeting. So that's when I found out from my psychiatrist that this was a condition I was born with, a psychological condition, not treatable and no cure. He was just trying to help me get past and start living as myself,
Okay.
but no idea where that would lead. That began what I call 45 years or 4.5 decades of repression. I got married in 1974. I started my career in tech. It turns out that there's a lot of us in tech. It's a great place to hide in corporations because most people don't want to speak to the geeks.
Mhm.
And it was great for me because I could immerse myself in the digital world, in my silicone life forms, as I called them, and just disappear there. And it helped. See, people like me need distractions to take the mind off of this, the incongruence between how you feel and how you identify versus your body and how you're forced to live.
Yeah.
That's what's so incredibly difficult about this. In fact, I wouldn't wish being born transgender on my worst enemy. That's how difficult it is to live outside of societal norms.
Yeah.
So I got to late 2014 and I still didn't know that things had changed. I was on the verge of killing myself. And I took one last look online to see if anything had changed with my diagnosis. That's when I found out that the WPATH, World Association for Transgender Health, Professional Health, that's when the medical diagnosis changed. A condition that I'm born with, treatable by hormone therapy, psychiatric therapy, psychology, and any necessary surgeries.
Wow.
I was all in, and that's what started the journey. Basically, I found a therapist and started therapy in January of 2015
Okay.
at age 67.
Wow.
And I was living full time as Wendy 6 months later in July of 2015. Thus, my belief too that while the community itself believes that transition is difficult and takes a long time, I don't. And I do believe that if you hold your belief that it's difficult and takes a long time, that's what it will be, difficult and take a long time.
I kind of think that maybe you have been transitioning or you had been transitioning that entire time, and it just came to the point that change was actually able to be seen.
Actually, Charlie, no.
Okay.
The repression was intense. I wouldn't even allow myself to think of it. My wife, when I told her about this in 1978, allowed me to cross dress. I tried it. She felt that it would relieve some of the stress and that we would stay together as long as I didn't try to do anything about this. Well, I knew I couldn't do anything about it because it's a medical condition with no treatment, no cure. So, total repression.
Okay.
When it popped out 4 years into marriage, I couldn't take the stress anymore. I told her all about it. I had been talking in my sleep about being a woman. She allowed me to cross dress. I hated it. At the end, I had to take everything off, and all that did was remind me of what I couldn't be and who I
Mm.
couldn't be.
Yeah.
So, the bottom line, Charlie, is between the ears, I was never a man. That was always there, day and night. It never goes away. It's not a choice. It's with me constantly. So, what happened in 2015 was now I know this is possible. I'm at a point in life where I can leave it all behind. I've got to do something about this. There's no choice. And my first therapy session, Steph was absolutely wonderful. Love her. I saw her for 5 years. She told me 3 years in, well, you don't really need to see me anymore. You're probably the healthiest person I know. And I said, no, I want to keep coming and do my monthly check ins just to make sure my alignment's good. I'm still on track. Everything's going along. And I like you. So, and I did ask her at one point, when I stopped seeing you, can we be friends? And she said, I would love that. So
Nice.
when I did finally stop seeing her, she wanted to let it go for another year or two, just in case I needed her professionally again.
Mhm,
And we did.
mhm.
And now we're friends
Nice.
and we stay in touch. And all that. But the first session, Charlie, this was what really kicked me off. I'm getting up to leave. I had poured my guts out for an extended session. It was an intake session.
Mhm.
First time, Charlie, I've ever talked to any human being about how I felt in 45 years. My wife and I didn't even really discuss it much. She didn't want to deal with it, and I don't blame her. That's part of the guilt that I carried. All the people in my life, I lied to by omission. I was living a lie. So for me, 2015 was just like, wow, now I can really do this. But in January, I had no clue. I'm getting up to leave my first session of therapy. And Steph looks at me and she says, what's your name? I immediately snapped back, Wendy. And to my joy, I saw her cross out my male representative's name, male facsimile, whatever you want to call him,
Mhm.
crossed out the name on my folder and wrote Wendy. And from that day forward, I was Wendy to her. By my third session, I had a confrontation with my wife. The rule was I could dress as Wendy, but I couldn't leave the house. And I said, I'm going to therapy as Wendy on Thursdays. And I did. I made that a boundary that I was doing this for me and there was no negotiation.
Yeah.
So I still didn't know if I could do this. at all. I didn't even know if I would like living as a woman. I just knew I had to do it.
Wow.
So that's how we got to here. And over that first 6 months, I did a lot of what I call my internal mental work.
Mhm.
I got back into my hippie days of meditation,
Okay.
mindfulness.
Mhm.
I started picking up on law of attraction. I started getting curious about how the human mind works, how it communicates with the body, how our emotions drive how our thoughts drive our emotions, and that those emotions and thoughts all form our beliefs. So I had all these thoughts going through my mind that, oh, this is going to be scary. You can't do this. What's going to happen if you get, figured out in public, all that kind of stuff. So I just sat there and just focused on how would it feel? Not what I think. Let get the logic out of it. How
Mhm.
would I feel walking outside as a female, wearing a dress, heels, a winter coat, walking into a grocery store, walking into a coffee shop? How would it feel to walk into therapy and sit in the waiting room with other people? And how would I feel doing that? And it felt wonderful. So, those are the feelings that I focused on rather than the scary logical thoughts that were going along in my mind. And I started learning to basically rewire those. I got into, at the same time, a lot of the spirituality, law of attraction worked for me, but it left me curious. The thoughts are in my mind. What's going on? How does those thoughts affect my body?
Mhm.
And the hypothalamus and various other glands throughout your body all produce chemicals. And every emotion has a chemical signature. That's how the
Mhm.
body knows. Ah, so in order to feel better, which is what life is all about, in order to feel better, change my thoughts, which changes my emotions, which changes the chemical signatures that get sent to my body.
Absolutely.
And it works. And that accelerated my transition tremendously. Just learning how to block those thoughts, rewire the brain, form new thoughts in your neural pathways, and get rid of the old ones. And I've fortunately found Dr. Joe Dispenza fairly quickly, read his book, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, and that was a very profound experience for me and really helped me significantly. By the time I got to May and June, I was just so happy. I started looking for apartments. I started hormone therapy in March 4th of 2015. And I announced that to my wife that I was going to Philadelphia to a clinic there and start hormone replacement therapy. She said to me, "Well, we didn't discuss it." My response was, "There's nothing to discuss. It's something I need to do for me. I need to find out how it feels. I need to find out where this is going.
Mhm.
As it's not a permanent thing at the moment, but I've got to try it."
Right.
And her response to me was very simple. "Okay, then in that case, we're getting a divorce." And I asked why, kind of knowing the answer. And she said, "You're going to develop breasts. We talked about some surgeries back in 78 and that you were interested in that. And so, Lord knows what else you're going to do. So, I'm not going to be married to a woman. I'm not a lesbian, and we're getting a divorce." My response was simple. Okay. That ended the conversation at
Yeah.
that point. And the relief I felt, it's like, okay, now made another step forward. With each step, it got less scary. It became I would say by April of that year, I was experiencing joy going through this. Every Thursday on the way to therapy, on the way home, and on the way there, I gave myself what I call life tests. I would stop for coffee, literally. The first time I tried it, I couldn't do it. I went into therapy. I said to Steph, I failed. She said, "No, you didn't. You'll do it when you're ready." That was a huge lesson.
We'll be right back after word from our sponsor.
Americans are increasingly concerned about mental health, with nearly 9 in 10 voters seeing it as a crisis. Mental Health First Aid provides crucial training to identify, understand, and respond to mental health and substance use challenges. Gain the skills and confidence to offer life-saving assistance. We offer courses for individuals, groups, and organizations of all sizes, including specialized training for veterans, law enforcement, EMS, and educators. Visit mentalhealthfirstaid.org or email hello@mentalhealthfirstaid.org to schedule your training and make a difference in your community.
Absolutely. So was Steph, is she a transition mentor? Is that how you
No,
started to work in that area, or how did you get there?
I started doing this fairly early on. I was living in a community, New Hope, Pennsylvania, which has a large gay population. And a lot of people in that area of Pennsylvania who cross dress and go for weekend events and stuff would come into New Hope.
Okay.
So I started meeting people there, and they were asking me how I did this in such a short period of time and did it well. And so I started helping people with various aspects. I would take people out for their first times out in public. I was walking with one person down a hiking trail into town. I was behind her, and women would be passing us on the trail coming this way. And she stopped me one day at that point and said, "Why is everybody laughing at me?" I said, "Well, this is something you have to learn. Part of the mannerisms and behaviors of male versus female. When that woman's coming to you and she's smiling or and says hi, she's not laughing at you. She's acknowledging you as another woman and greeting you." Oh, that's what it was. These are the things that you have to learn.
Gotcha.
Little girls are taught from childhood all the way through by their mothers, by their relatives, by their girlfriends, and whatever else help they get. How to be women, how to socialize,
That's
all
true.
of that.
Yep.
I had just the reverse. And oh, by the way, as far as my parents were concerned, don't you dare show anything feminine or we'll commit you. So this was so freeing. And then what I found is I actually loved helping people. I had surgery at NYU Medical Center in 2017, bottom surgery. My gay friends would look at me and go, "Oh, Wendy, how can you do that?" And my response was always, "Oh, I'm getting my birth defect corrected." And it was such an empowering, wonderful experience. I absolutely loved the whole thing. I ran into the hospital at 5:45 in the morning. Couldn't wait. 5 days in the hospital and discharged and back home. And on day 7, I was back in town at one of the patio bars talking with friends and all of that. I'd been resting and it was all good. And so I got past that. I wound up helping somewhere in the neighborhood of 20, 25 girls get into NYU for their surgeries.
Right.
I went with some of them and I stayed overnight with them when they got discharged. And it was a very an interesting experience, something I'd never envisioned doing, but I loved it.
Nice.
Just seeing people go through this and emerge and blossom and just
Mhm.
become themselves and finally do what they needed to do.
Absolutely.
So 2018 and 2019, I was still just kind of casually helping people, and I was dating. I knew what my gender identity was that was between the ears.
Mhm.
I still didn't know what my sexual orientation was for sure. I got married. I didn't date much because I was afraid to date because I figured, well, women might be able to figure me out, and I was hiding my secret.
Gotcha.
It was really kind of strange because gay people used to scare the hell out of me for the same reason. And now some of my closest friends are gay. It blew me away when I found out that gay people don't understand me any more than cisgender people do. So I had a blast educating gay people.
Nice.
I would look at the guys and say, "You got married, you did this, you did this, you did this." Yep. Well, and then you came out and now you're here. Yep. Well, so did I. The only difference between you and me is you became a G, I became a T. That's it. And we established a conversation after that. And I got asked tons of questions and I loved it. That's when I started saying, I'm an open book. Ask me anything you want to, and absolutely nothing is off limits.
Okay.
And dating was interesting. I did find out that I'm actually a heterosexual female.
Okay.
Loved it. Before that, when I was living as a guy, oh, no way in hell. Not gay. That's why I say after surgery, I figured out what my true sexual orientation really was.
Yeah. Yeah. And so in working with others as they transition, how do you help people overcome those fears that you mentioned or as they walk through the world looking differently, even though what they look like now may match what they felt like, their whole lives, how do you help them overcome those fears? Like it has to be scary to do.
Wendy's 80% rule. All life change is 80% between the ears. So I put my coaching work online in 2020. That's how I spent the pandemic.
Okay.
2021, I was live. And one of the first things I do with my clients is we start doing the internal work. Most people focus on the presentation, the makeup, the clothing, and it feels good. They love it. But the minute they hit public and start going out in front of other people, they're terrified of being discovered.
Right.
Well, the way I do it is I change what's going on between their ears. That little voice that's in there saying that you can't do things,
Yep.
that it's scary, you're going, no. I help them learn to manage those thoughts, to block the ones that are not supportive, not serving them, and
Mhm.
get rid of them and replace them with thoughts that are more supportive and enables them to start moving forward. I view the difference between what I do and a therapist. I insist all my clients have therapists.
Okay.
People like myself needed a therapist desperately. Tons of baggage from my past to unpack. I had to learn forgiveness for the doctor who called me a freak, forgiveness for my parents who threatened to commit me, and probably electroshock therapy or whatever they were doing then. So when I start working with someone, we start going through what is going on in your mind? What are your thoughts? A therapist works with them from their past all the way through to their present.
Mhm.
I pick up in the present, and everything I do is designed to get them unstuck and able to start taking steps moving forward. I've had clients who sat down with me for their first session and said, I'm scared, I'm tired of living a lie, and I have no clue what I'm doing. And my response was, great, that's why you're here. Let's get to work. And I've had quite a few clients. My one-on-one coaching session goes 16 weeks.
Okay, wow.
And it's intensive for those 16 weeks. They get homework every week. I make them focus on their internal thoughts, their beliefs, and start teaching them how to incrementally shift those beliefs to be more supportive. And at the same time, also help them create a roadmap of all the things in their life that are going to change and that they need to address. And that serves two purposes. It helps them see where they're going, and over time, they can see all the things they've checked off and accomplished, even when they're having difficulty. I also go through a lot with behaviors and mannerisms because we have to deconstruct all the male or female socialization that occurred and rebuild so that there's some confidence going out into the world. I totally believe in self-awareness. And that's one thing I find that people, when I start working with them, they're not really that self-aware. And we work to increase that level so that they can actually begin that deconstruction process and the behavior and mannerisms process and be very aware of what they're doing. The other thing that I work on right up front is self-acceptance. If you don't accept who you are unconditionally without logic applied to it, this whole process is going to be a struggle, even after you're living full time. I have met girls who've been living and working full time that are terrified to go out and socialize in society. They only go to gay bars and they only socialize with each other. And I'm sorry, I'm not going to live that way. I don't reveal myself and my past to just anybody. I don't even think of it when I'm out. I'll go to a straight bar and sit there and talk with people and listen to the music and have a good time, and never once even think about being trans.
Yeah.
And as an example there, I met a girl recently about three months ago or so. She'd been living full time for 8 months, really intelligent girl, really liked her. And we were talking on Zoom, and she said to me, after 8 months, you'd think I wouldn't get misgendered, but I'm called sir everywhere I go. And I said, okay, I'm looking at you. I don't see a sir. What are you experiencing in your mind when you're out in public running errands and being called sir? Well, I am a trans woman. And I said, stop. Take that word trans and delete it from your vocabulary. You're living as a woman. Accept yourself as that. And drop the word trans. You're not being a traitor to the community. And you're just another woman blending into society. I also dislike the word passing intensely. It puts pressure on you to be perfect, and it implies that you're different.
Yeah.
Calling yourself a trans woman also implies that you are different. Mentally, we weren't different the way we were born. Emotionally, and our identity was a legitimate thing. That's how it was formed. That's how we were born.
Mm-hmm.
And everything I do from that point forward is to try and get them back in touch with that feeling. And it works.
Nice.
I've had clients in southern states and all that transitioned within anywhere between 6 and 10 or 12 weeks,
Wow.
going from living male to living female full time.
Wow.
Sure, they had a lot more to do,
Hmm.
and the surgeries and all the other stuff that they may or may not choose to do, but they're out and about and they're comfortable. And that's what I mean by getting people unstuck. It works.
That's impressive. That's impressive. And you mentioned quite a few times your parents' response to you when you mentioned who you were to them. Do you have any advice for parents who are having similar conversations with their children that may be considering or undergoing transition? How can parents do better?
I've actually added parent coaching to my
Cool.
programs as well.
Nice.
And the reason for that is I started to realize that there's so many parents out there that find out that their kids are, whether they're 10 years old, 15 years old, 25 years old, or 45 years old, the parents all seem to go, "What? This is such a stigmatized subject
Mhm.
that they can't believe it's in their family." And the other thing that I came to realize is that they would throw their kids out or disown them or whatever. I decided I don't want o- other kids to live the way I had to live and repress this and do all the painful, gut wrenching stuff that living with that incongruence between your being and your body and how you have to live in society. That's a horrible, painful way to live. So, one of the things I try to do with parents is give them a framework of how to understand this, how to understand the transgender community. It's a very diverse community with a lot of different types of people. I happen to be in the transsexual part of the community, but there's a lot of other groups throughout that community. And I also explain to them that this is nothing they did wrong. This is how your child was born. And then I help them try to comprehend it. I don't expect anyone, even any of your audience listening to this, I don't expect them to understand this unless you've ever looked in the mirror at yourself and said, "I'm all wrong. I should have been a girl or I should have been a boy. I should be living as a man. I should be living as a woman." If you've never done that, you can't understand this. And I don't expect you to. What I want to do is provide a framework by which people can see this and see it from a more humanized perspective. We're not freaks. We're not somebody to be terrified of. And we definitely don't go into restrooms and try and molest people. That's all the divisive stuff that other people put out there.
Mhm.
And that's one of the reasons why I'm doing podcast interviews.
Understood.
How many times I've asked people, "Have you ever met anyone like me knowingly?" And they'll go, "No." I said, "Well, now you can ask all the questions you want to." And being totally open with people, I choose my time and places to do it. I don't walk around with a sign that says I'm trans, and I never will. I don't even wear the pins or anything like that. And it's not because I don't like the community. I totally respect it. And I know there are a lot of people that struggle with this. And that's what I try to help.
Absolutely. And a lot of times the labels for things can cause the stigma to come up and sometimes cause more issues than you're going against those issues to help them transition. So I completely understand that.
Okay.
Completely understand that. So as we get ready to close, are there any final remarks, any success stories that you'd like to share with us?
Oh, yes. In my travels doing these podcast interviews over the past 12 months, I met a lovely woman in Phoenix, Arizona, Lynn Murphy. She was going to interview me for a chapter in her second edition of her book, Women Who Push the Limits, and her publisher wanted her to put some diversity into it, and I'm diversity. So we met, we chatted a little bit in November. Then in December, we started recording. And it was the idea to record for her chapter in her book and her podcast.
Okay.
That recording session lasted almost 4 hours. And we never got to her questions. We did a lot of talking, and it was great. That has evolved. We're now friends. I'm co hosting a brand new podcast with her. And I named it Demystifying the Transgender Journey.
Okay.
We also started a Facebook group by the same name, and it's open to anyone curious about what it's like being born transgender and how to comprehend this. And it's kind of in keeping with the concept that I grew up with from 2015 to now. I put myself together with people to talk about this. Well, the idea of this group and the podcast is to put information out there that is relevant, that helps people comprehend this and have a framework for it. And I'm also, as part of the Facebook group, which just started in August, I want to start a discussion group where I'm putting straight people together with transgender people. And we've even included gay people because gay people want to learn about this too. We already have a member who actually stated that he needs to understand this.
Nice.
And every time he asks somebody a question, they get angry at him. It's not my responsibility to educate you. That's something that I fundamentally disagree with. I believe that if somebody is honestly and openly asking questions, wanting to understand, I should be answering them and talking with them. And especially if they're respectful and everything, I have
Right.
made more friends that way. And so that's what I'm trying to do with this group. And that's what Lynn is a cisgender woman, wonderful person, very liberal, very open and curious, and knew very little, almost nothing about the LGBT community. Since we met in November, I've been educating her. She's done her research. She's gone out and talked with other people. And as part of this podcast, we're going to be interviewing other people who support the community, other transgender people. And because I'm not the only story out there. And my story has a lot of commonality with other people, but also there are unique differences between us too. And that's something that I'm very excited about. We're going to start airing, I'm fingers crossed, if everything goes well with my editing and with everything with Lynn and everything, we're going to start airing this month.
Oh, wow. Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's
And
impressive.
any of your listeners who are interested in joining our Facebook group or listening to our podcast are more than welcome.
Nice.
And I'm working on my edits to a book that I put together for parents of transgender. I'm going to title it Love Knows No Gender, How to Parent a Transgender Child,
Nice.
where child is relationship, not age.
Understood. Understood. And that's very necessary because, like you said, it's not some children know or, young ages that they
Mhm.
know and are ready to talk about it, then not necessarily always. So being able to be the voice and provide some direction is admirable. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So, as we come to a close today, can you share with us where folks can learn more about gender change, about your coaching services, and where they can learn more about your work?
Absolutely. Best way to connect with me is meetwendycole.com. There they'll find scheduling on my calendar, signing up for my newsletter, and the bottom button takes them to my primary website where everything is outlined and spelled out. And that's also where in my blog, I organize all my podcast interviews.
Okay.
And there's a wealth of information on my main website.
Well, Wendy, I have truly enjoyed speaking with you. You've really opened my mind up to some things that I was not aware of. I had some assumptions, as I'm sure some of our listeners have as well. So thank you so much for opening our eyes up today and giving us a new perspective on transition and how it's best achieved. So thank you again for speaking with us.
Thank you, Sharlee.
Absolutely. And thank you to our listeners for taking the time to join us. The resources for this episode and an archive of all of our other episodes can be found on our webpage at triadhq.com/BHT. And we look forward to having you back with us next time on Behavioral Health Today.
We appreciate all the support from our community, and if you like our show, one of the best ways you can support it is by giving us a 5-star rating and leaving a review. Behavioral Health Today is a podcast part of the Triad Behavioral Health Network, all rights reserved.